The grassroots level has been a kind of a robust futures market for a long time, several decades, and really the market starts after puberty. When you're looking at middle school kids who start to develop and grow, and you start projecting, can those players, eventually become stars at the high school level, the college level, and ultimately as professionals. So there are people out looking for the next big thing as early as 13, 14, 15 years old. And if you can be the person that finds a rising star, that can be very valuable for you.
These are people looking, they're not necessarily affiliated with any university, right? I mean, how does that translate into compensation for them?
Yeah.
Or why do they do it?
Well, access is king. And if you can attach yourself to a star player and perhaps guide his path, whether it's to high school and then eventually to college or whatever, you can become pretty valuable, and you can be financially rewarded yourself as somebody who's of influence about where a young man's going to go. The shoe companies want to get involved with players at a young age. High schools do. Increasingly in this NIL era, agents want to get involved, and so they've got people out looking on their behalf, runners, and there's a lot of ways for people to cash in on grassroots basketball.
So these folks, these runners, as you call them, those are the people out and about trying to say, hey, I found this, you want to take a look. It's almost like a kind of a scout, but not an official scout.
Yeah, right. There are plenty of people out there without official titles who are scouting playgrounds, pickup games, middle school events, the grassroots tournaments, travel basketball. And if those folks, can find somebody, yeah, then, one of the things I've learned in talking to college coaches is they've got to communicate with a lot of quote unquote street agents just to find out where the players are. During the course of the evolution of grassroots recruiting, the shoe companies began to get more influence, the high schools less influence. It became just more, the gray area expanded, and there was just more of a vacuum that was filled by unofficial scouts and evaluators, street agents.
Growing internationally, when did you start seeing that move in that direction?
Yeah, the international boom has really been fascinating. We've had international players for a long time who have had, great careers, either collegiately or professionally or both in the United States. You can go back to, Akeem Olajuwon and people like that in the 1980s. But really, it's become more pronounced, I would say, in the last 10 to 15 years. And there's just been, a great influx, I think, of talented players who see the opportunities for them in the United States, and then opportunistic middlemen in the U.S., in Canada, and elsewhere that want to bring players over and get them situated and control their development and their path towards a potential professional future.
Do you think that the international push, it started more on like high school age type of prospects, and now it's moving to middle school age prospects?
Yeah, I think that everything has trickled down in recruiting. Everything's accelerated, and I think the international boom is no different as far as that, because you've seen a lot of players come over, from Africa, from Europe, from South America, get to United States prep schools or even public schools and start their careers that way. And so if you can get a 17-year-old to come to the U.S. and play well, why not look for a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old?
Or a 13-year-old.
Or a 13-year-old.
Especially if you're supposedly 13 or 14 and 7 feet tall.
Yeah, right. And that's, again, like the ability to find physically developed, mature players as soon as you can is an imperative, and then find a place to put them. I think that there's been plenty of people, especially in Africa, who have kind of established themselves as a go-to person to, like, hey, I have found these players and we can get them to you, whether it's Canada or the U.S. And so those sort of reputations get established, and yes, pipelines do develop.
But money has to be the motivating factor here.
Grassroots basketball has been filled with opportunists and people looking for a way to make money, and there's all sorts of levels at which you can ask for money. Hey, I've got a player. Are you interested? Well, maybe. You know, do you have $1,000 and I can send you some highlights, or I can give you contact information? Sure, okay. You know, we'd like to come see him in person. Well, you know, we could help arrange that, but it's going to cost some money to get involved. Well, hey, you come see him and he looks good. We'd like to bring him to the United States. Well, you know, that's going to require a pretty big investment on your part. And so there's a whole underground economy basically involved in getting established rapport with players and then getting them where you want them.
Do these street agents stay connected with these prospects all the way up until they get to the NBA?
You would be shocked how many NBA players still are either represented by or have relationships with people who got to know them when they were 14, 15 in the recruiting process. Some street agents, some shoe reps. There are very successful NBA agents and even front office people who started off as hustlers on the street level. That's kind of been the nature of the evolution of the game. Is if you get in early, you can stay in and go a long way with the right players.
I wanted to ask you about with NIL. That just seems to be exploding right now. Does that make it even more enticing for this type of behavior, this process to happen?
Yeah, I think the NIL evolution has probably ramped up the dynamic even more of looking at young athletes, young basketball players as commodities and their value. It's a little bit more above board and public now. I mean, a lot of people have said NIL stands for now it's legal. And I think you've seen some of that where, hey, there's state laws in several states where high school athletes can receive NIL funding. And even where there isn't, they're probably receiving NIL funding. So the amount of money that high school and college players could make publicly is exploded. And I think that has just created a bigger market for people who can help get them to the money. If the kids are being exploited, then there's a real problem, you know, and if they're just purely being taken advantage of for whatever the NIL opportunities are, whatever the collective opportunities are, then that's the seemingly obvious but unintended consequence of the NIL era is you're going to create a bigger, more lucrative market at a younger age. So who's going to fill the void of steering players through this? Schools have tried and they have some involvement, but we have this entire collective economy over here that's run by people who are allegedly not affiliated with the school. And we've seen some deals go very wrong for some football players, some basketball players at the college level. And the NCAA, again, has just been largely powerless to try to rein this in and put up guardrails on the situation.
It seems like on every level, they know what's going on, right? They know that this is going on and it's like the open secret.
Oh yeah, I mean, sure. The underground economy is still humming. And the people that were involved tend to remain involved and to take advantage of the situation. And yeah, I think that everyone now, there's a general understanding of what the quote unquote going rate is for players of certain caliber. And so, you know, people are trying to cash in on wherever they may be in the buying and selling here. High school sports, same thing. Absolutely. That you've got, you know, players who are viewed as commodities at a younger and younger age. And, you know, even high school coaches back in the day, you know, were generally considered mentors. They might be more closely affiliated with schools. They might be teachers at the schools. I think there's probably a fraying there. And so who's who's minding the kids in these situations? That's the big question, and where are they getting their advice and their guidance? One of the most amazing things about covering basketball from the grassroots through college for 30 plus years is that certain characters never go away. And if they're good at working their way in with players, they can be valuable to colleges and other people trying to get those players. And you may have a bad reputation, but you cycle out for a generation and you come back and people don't remember what your reputation was and start all over again. And there's a remarkable number of the same people who have been involved for 20, 30 years in negative or at least questionable ways with players.
Would you say Brandon Bender is one of them?
Every indication is Brandon Bender is somebody who continues to show up. Yeah. You know, I don't know every player he's been involved with for 20 years, but there's been several of them, and more often than not, there tends to be controversy, acrimony, maybe NCAA issues, and, you know, somebody that people apparently continue to deal with him.
Your experience with him, you started writing about him a while ago, right?
When he was in high school.
When he was in high school, because he was a star in high school.
Absolutely. He was, you know, one of those 6'9", 200-plus pound, athletically impressive guys I saw, you know, like a sophomore at Ballard maybe. You know, I mean, he played in college briefly at Louisville, and it didn't go well, didn't end well. He had some flashes of brilliance, but he and Rick Pitino were at loggerheads, and I think there were some issues there. And, you know, Bender's playing career certainly probably didn't go the way he aspired for it to go, and he got into the economy of basketball. Things were not very clearly defined, what exactly his role was, who he was working for. Was he trying to become a college coach? How did he get involved with various players? What were these overseas connections? There were local players, there were players all over the place, and then some of the college coaches he got involved with were some interesting guys. Generation after generation, his name keeps coming up, I'll say that. You know, I mean, this is probably well over 20 years of hearing Brandon Bender's name in the news cycle. I'd say a lot of the people involved in bringing players over from Africa, you have reason to question what exactly the motivation is, and just given Brandon Bender's track record, I think that it's worth asking a lot of questions. The worst thing about it is you just feel like there are children who are being commoditized at a young age and taken advantage of and not being given guidance that is there to help them. It's more a case of what can they do to help the adults around them cash in on their potential. There's story after story after story about kids, especially that came from Africa, who, you know, get told there's going to be this opportunity for them somewhere in the United States to play basketball. They take it because it sounds promising, and they'll arrive and the living conditions are not good and the promises are not kept, and there's kind of a rinse out system of those who are going to be good get taken care of, and those who aren't, well, turns out you could be halfway around the world and nobody cares about you very much anymore.